Morning, everyone, both here in Cambridge and online from all over the world, to the good, the bad, and the good enough. PLNB's 38th Annual International Conference. Thank you for joining us. You've just seen the Danish National Orchestra playing and singing their outstanding version of this year's theme tune, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We're sure that you enjoyed it and will be delighted by every aspect of the conference. That's the plan. Welcome to you. I'm Stewart Dresner, founder and chief executive of Privacy Laws and Business, PLNB. We're the world's longest running established company and working on privacy laws worldwide and their impact on business. Now in our 39th year running events and publications. There's a world of difference between describing privacy laws as ugly and describing them as good enough, or to use the EU term, adequate. However, we rejected the term adequate for the conference because that would frame the conference in a Eurocentric way. So this would not be appropriate when we always include jurisdictions from outside the European Economic Area, the EEA. This year's conference with speakers from 11 of those jurisdictions and covering privacy law developments in Asia, the Arab region, Caribbean and Europe. Should we describe a bad law as one which is poorly drafted, or not enforced, or both? Where there's the political will, even a badly drafted law can set the baseline standard which can be developed when the time is right. After all, virtually every national law has been adapted over time to meet changing political priorities and each society's needs. There are parallels with other areas of life. For example, no one would describe my personal fitness program as good, but maybe, taking into consideration my work-life balance, it's good enough. From laws to your compliance program, there's a difference between describing a compliance program as ugly and describing it as good enough. Privacy law set a common standard for everyone, which requires the good and action against the bad, but many organisations only for the good enough. This conference will help you reach the gold standard, if that's what you want, or assess the risks of aiming for at least a good enough standard. Good enough depends on your perspective. Some organisations work towards high data standards driven by a combination of ethics, law and reputation. Others aim for good enough in some areas which can lead to concerns about crossing lines. For example, one, concern about your reputation with consumers and employees, concern about avoiding data protection authorities' attention, and concern about keeping compliance costs within budget. This conference brings you presentations by 24 company managers and in-house lawyers from many sectors and countries on how they manage the internal politics, the practical challenges, and sometimes grey areas represented by a good enough policy. We learned at our Ireland conference in Dublin in February this year that Ireland's Data Protection Commissioner, Dr. Des Hogan, has decided to help companies move in the right direction at an early stage of developing products and services, rather than taking enforcement action at a later stage. He said, quote, "We always remain open to discuss companies' plans in a confidential setting," end of the quote. He told us that he expects better compliance from big tech companies, which have large privacy teams, compared with smaller organisations. In most, if not all jurisdictions, regulators work towards organisations reaching a high level of compliance with the law, but a good enough standard is more realistic. Faced by a daunting list of different types of privacy laws and legal duties, it's not surprising that some companies accept the EU gold standard as good and apply it to their business everywhere. Other companies make an assessment of the low risk of sanctions, consider it low and go for good enough. Whatever your type of organisation, it's clear that most of you now have to wear many types of hat. These hats now often also cover artificial intelligence issues. We recognise this challenge at our 2 sessions today directly assessing AI issues, 2 tomorrow and 1 on Wednesday. Laws everywhere set the standard expected in each jurisdiction. At this conference, we'll meet and hear regulators and policymakers from 9 jurisdictions: Bermuda, France, Gibraltar, Guernsey, Ireland, Isle of Man, Jersey, Malta and the United Kingdom. Off the record, some EU national data protection authorities have told me that they are looking with interest at the modest diversion from the EU GDPR provided by the UK's new law. The new Danish presidency of the EU has published its programme for the 6 months of their presidency, which started last week on 1st of July. The title of this programme, A Strong Europe in a Changing World, reveals their proposals to transform EU data protection law policy. Until this year, the conversation around data protection law in Europe has emphasised the framework of fundamental rights. We're always hearing about fundamental rights. But this is a time of transition, just right now. For many years, speakers from the European Commission and the European Data Protection Board, the EDPB, at this conference and elsewhere have stated firmly that the GDPR will not be opened up for amendment, and there's been good reason for that. There's 4 main points that I can work out for not changing the GDPR. 1, the GDPR took several years to develop from the previous Data Protection Directive. It attracted 3,000 plus amendments for discussion in the European Parliament. It was a political compromise, and it would be too exhausting and time-consuming to start the process again. However, in the Danish document, I believe this is the first time an EU presidency's agenda has proposed specifically and in writing amendments to the GDPR. In a section headed Simplification and Burden Reduction, the EU's motivation is explicitly innovation and economic growth. Here on Wednesday, to mark this turning point, we will have a speaker from the EDPB. She will report to us the hot news from the EDPB's plenary meeting discussing this issue. So we are on the point of change. Until now, the member states' DPAs, data protection authorities in the EDPB, have supported a modest move towards fewer legal duties for small and medium enterprises. Now, as of 3rd of July, last week, the EDPB is embracing wider reform. The document title that they produced as a result of their meeting last week was the Helsinki Statement on Enhanced Clarity, Support and Engagement, shows that the EDPB is taking a new path. There's also data protection and an economic growth dimension to the G7. At its meeting in Banff in Alberta in June, they declared the importance of respecting the principle of data protection by design to encourage responsible innovation. We can now see a trend towards economic factors playing a more dominant role at national level. I'm pleased to welcome here Monsieur Bertrand Dumaret, the CNIL Commissioner, who was there at the G7 in Canada and is here with us now to speak this afternoon on the CNIL's work on privacy and mobile apps, an area where the CNIL has taken a leading role. Also, in another initiative emphasising economic growth, the CNIL published only 2 weeks ago a policy paper on cybersecurity with the title The Economic Benefits of GDPR. In my judgment, economic factors have led to climate change, a concept which I'm applying here, not to the weather, but to privacy laws. Turning to the UK, certainly the UK government aimed at the good, so that the new Data Use and Access Act 2025 would be compatible with the Council of Europe Convention on Human Rights. Although this is normal practice, some ministers in the previous government wanted the UK to withdraw from the convention. So the government now, been in place for a year, said we must keep within that framework. So the UK's new 3 weeks old data law, so only 3 weeks old, comes at the perfect time for this conference and the July edition of PLB report. So we like to think that privacy laws of business has a certain influence with the Parliament, government, making sure the law was adopted at just the right time for us so we could be the first conference to talk about it. So well done, British government. The question is, will the European Commission see the new law as adequate? It's the big question. There's a risk of losing EU adequacy status if the new law diverges too far from the EU norm. How far is too far? For now, the UK government has the confidence that the new UK law is good enough. However, EDRI, a coalition of European civil rights groups, has declared that the UK law is not good enough, and they will keep campaigning along those lines. Now, privacy laws and business is more than this annual conference. We cover data law themes, the legal requirements, regulatory interpretation and company implementation. We publish the Blue International Report, this one here, which it's available outside or downstairs. There, we cover 170 plus countries, laws, bills, court decisions and interviews with companies and regulators, from which we distill practical advice and checklists for good practice. And we also publish the Red UK edition, both edited by my good colleague Laura Linkomis. They are published in alternate months, and so do collect copies downstairs if you haven't already, and available also in PDF and HTML formats. So, and you can see the benefits of subscribing on page 15 of your programme. Take advantage of our introductory offer by becoming a subscriber. Now, Laura Linkomis, as editor, is here somewhere. Hello, Laura's over there. Deputy editor Tom Cooper's over here. And Meryl Dresner, who is my wife, right at the back there, assistant editor and also my wife, so she has two jobs. And they'll all be here, happy to talk to you about the reports. If you'd like to feature, we do have company case studies. We're happy to discuss that with you. Thank you also to our generous sponsors for supporting the conference in many ways, some for several years and some new. In alphabetical order, they are Cooley, Dastra, Denton's, Freshfields, Latham and Watkins, Linklaters, Meta, Morrison Forster, Phase Law, Slaughter and May, TikTok, Westbrook Data Protection Services and White and Case. Please respond, so thank you to them. Please, we also be sending you a feedback survey, so please respond to that while you're here. Tell us the subjects and countries you would like PLB to cover in future. You can see the information in the conference programme on our next two events on page 13 of the programme. We've got the next event, two events are in London. We've got an event on October the 1st in London on the new UK law, maximising opportunities, and then on the 4th of November, an event all about the USA, US law and the differences between US and Europe, which are many. So if you're a subscriber to either or both of those reports, you can entry to those events free of charge. Now, thank you to all my colleagues mentioned on page 2 here, and all the PLB team have blue dots on their badges, speakers and chairpersons have red dots on their badges, and DPAs and government people have green dots. Everyone tells us they enjoy the social and networking side of this conference, our meals together, medieval hall, the walks, floating downstream in traditional punts tomorrow evening, for example. This evening at dinner, I'm sure you'll enjoy the Guildhall Jazz Singers, elite singers. Thank you for listening. I declare this conference open.